on the hills.
I'm good. Really?
Oh, no, because I couldn't get my act together and John just.
No, this is the only thing we're coming in.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, and this is at the end. This is the very end. This is the post. Yeah. And we have 3 hymns, 1 verse love, and then 2 German things.
German things.
One by Haydn and the third.
Yeah, that's
My sweater was on down for I was choking. I'm like, what? You know what? Got dressed in the dark this morning and yeah. I'm sorry.
Thanks for pitching your they might not even
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for the
Joe called her to double check yesterday and make sure she got the. Like, I said, you better make sure you find out if he got it. Oh, you did?
How are you?
Yeah.
Caffeine.
My wife.
There you go.
He's a caffeine.
Oh, yeah.
No,
That would actually be
I
really
do
good.
what Angel calls Latino coffee.
Yeah.
It's about this much coffee and that much sugar.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Brazilian.
Brazilian. Yeah. Again, it's a black. She'll try a little salmon in it, maybe. I don't think it's good coffee. I just ordered a new coffee.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, you're good.
Did you drive?
I, of course,
With a family?
yeah.
Really?
You gotta know. Unless you're staying with someone.
Oh, wow.
Get close. Parody of them there.
Mm.
You're
Yeah, at least 3. They weren't going to take care of a lot.
Their family realizes that they see it.
Ah. Do they live in where?
Massachusetts.
Which town?
Well, her father lives outside of the district.
Yeah, everybody actually.
And we want to kill.
It's right next to Westwood.
Well, that area. And they all make a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's Westwood and UT Surgery. And the other one's who's consulting for the hospitals and work out their pocket policy in Massachusetts. Yeah, all those mother, she is very they all
realized too late that we couldn't go out to Rockford Christmas Eve. Because we hadn't been planning on it. Angel's family is there. He's got 6 nieces and nephews at the age of 7. The oldest is 21 and the youngest is 3. That's
So, yeah,
I don't know.
you're the one that has big units.
this is in Worcester. Oh, in Rockford.
Well, Jen has a stand.
Kind of surprised they did.
Oh, it's huge. It's one of the largest churches. Wow. Yeah, the Rockford is in school.
Rockford is very evangelical.
I had to go buy more of these. The one that disappeared. Sunday,
Oh, okay.
You can't let me know. Yeah, yeah.
Good morning. My name is Ann Harrington. I am a member of the Board of Trustees. Welcome to our service. Unitarian Universalism encourages an open-ended search for meaning in life and a commitment to asking our values to shape our actions. We are a pluralistic religion that draws wisdom from many sources. We welcome all people into our community of whatever age, race, class, ethnicity, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious background. We especially welcome those of you who may be worshiping with us for the first time. We invite you to join us after service downstairs for coffee, snacks, and conversation so that we can get to know you better. Guests are welcome to participate in any activities in our community. If you would like more information about the congregation, or if you have any questions, please ask any board member or Reverend Patrick Price. Thank you.
Is Elaine here?
Okay. Next Saturday at 1 o'clock at Ridgecrest in the chapel, because they have the 3 big screens, my friend Rasika, and I cannot pronounce her last name or her husband's name, Rasika and her husband are coming from Dubuque with slides that will not be pleasant from their work in Sri Lanka last summer, where they went into the jungle and studied elephant poop and microplastics killing the elephants. And as she emailed me from Sri Lanka, it was all she could do not to cry. And yesterday I heard her, and I realized how little we really know, even when we think we watch the news all the time. Schools were closed in Sri Lanka recently because of some air mass that came from India and ruined the air and whatever. So they will talk about all those things. He's a professor in environment. She is, I believe, the head of the biology department at the University of Dubuque. And so it will be on Zoom, and it will also be live. So I hope you come and hear her, because I feel really guilty every time I take a drink from someone else's plastic bottle, because I don't buy them.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. To love life is to notice the wonders that abound, and to notice the wonders that abound is to be grounded here and now. And to be grounded here and now is the beginning of finding love for this life today. Let us ground ourselves in this instant in the worship of all things good and right. Alan, let's move to the chalice lighting. There's a little shift in who is doing what this morning. Please join us in our unison chalice lighting. Together we say, we come together every week, bound not by a creed or a mutual desire to please one God or many gods. Yet we are drawn together by a belief that how we are in the world, who we are, matters. We light this chalice together in the knowledge that love, not fear, can change this world. And in that spirit, we sing our opening hymn, number 189, Light of Ages and of Nations, in your gray hymnal and on the screen. Please rise as you're willing and able in body or spirit. Please remain standing and join us in our responsive reading, number 671, Freedom, and also on the screen by John Milton. Let us begin. Our faith and knowledge thrive by exercise as well as our limbs and complexion. Waters of truth flow not in perpetual progression. They sicken into a muddy pool of conformity and tradition. The light which we have gained was given us not to be ever staring on, but by it to discover onward things more remote from our knowledge. Give me liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to conscience, above all liberties. And though all the winds of doctrine were let loose to play on the earth, so truth be in the field, we do injuriously without our first strength. For who knows not the truth is strong next to the Almighty? She needs no policies, no stratagems to make her victorious. Let her and falsehood grapple, whoever knew truth, look to the worst in a free and open encounter. And now we greet the holy in our midst by briefly turning and greeting our neighbors. What? You want to come?
I like to watch.
Okay, I'll grab one of those. Y'all are getting better at that. And now our message for all ages from our Director of Religious Education, Ken Johnson.
Hi, everybody, welcome to be back. Hi, yes, we're all enthusiastic, and it's not for the picture. My boy made this one day after being mad. Who knows why 8-year-olds get mad? It was probably because I had to take him off the screen, but if you look closely, you can tell that this was made on an iPad, so somehow or another he won that one. But he got mad, and I told him, look, you're not normally like this. I know you're upset, but we need to calm down, so why don't you go read a book? He said, ugh. But he went because he loves books. Because the books that he likes are action, adventure. They're all stuff that little boys like. But there's one thing that I've always known about him is that he likes to read. That is an essential part of who he is. He could sit there and tell you the story of, I don't know, at least 50 different books. And he got down after reading a book, and he wrote his own story about the stuff that he had been reading. And I feel like this kind of goes in with what we're going to be talking about downstairs, which is finding your center, which doesn't necessarily have to be about being peaceful or calm, but that's totally what happened with him. But it can also be about finding out what makes you you, finding out the things that you like, finding out that there's a lot of different people that can make things that you enjoy once you figure out what it is that you like. There's a lot of different people who work on books, and it takes a lot to put that out. And if you think about that interconnectedness, that story had to start somewhere. And then it went to a printing press, and then it went to test readers, and it went through a lot of different people before it ended up in a little boy's hand so that he could enjoy it. And finding our center could just be about finding that love that we have and realizing that it does take a community to sometimes reach those end goals. And this book that I would like to share with you all is by Mo Willems, performed by Amber Wren. It's called Because. Mo Willems is one of our favorite authors in the house, and if you can read the Knuffle Bunnies, 1, 2, and 3, you will be crying by the third Knuffle Bunny. Trust me, it's a gorgeous book, especially for the parents out there. But I wanted to read this because I feel like this book has a great way of showing how a seed can start somewhere in the community and have a community build around it and grow into something else that can inspire lots of other people. So, because a man named Ludwig wrote beautiful music, a man named Franz was inspired to write his own. Because many years later, people wanted to hear Franz's beautiful music, they formed an orchestra. And because a man had practiced since he was a kid, he was asked to join. Because a woman studied night and day, she too was asked to play. And because many others loved and practiced their instruments, there were enough musicians. Because someone created a poster about Franz's music, tickets were sold. And because the train conductor stopped the train at the Grand Concert Hall, the orchestra conductor arrived. Because the orchestra librarian had copies of the score, the orchestra rehearsed. Because workers checked the lights and the seats and swept the floors, the grand hall was ready. And because the time had come, the ushers opened the door. Now, because someone's uncle had caught a cold, someone's aunt had an extra ticket for someone special. Because the usher helped out the aunt and her special guest, they found their seats. And because everyone was there to hear the beautiful music, it was quiet. In row C, seat 14, sat a girl with the uncle's ticket. She had heard the beautiful music written by the man named Franz, and it had changed her. The girl was changed. From that moment on, the girl learned everything she could about music. Soon, she started to write music too, because like Franz, the young woman had something to share. Over time, the woman became very good and she worked very hard. And one night, her music was discovered because she was also very lucky. We're missing some pages. Then she was invited to perform her music at the Grand Concert Hall because so many people wanted to hear it. Her composition was dedicated to her uncle in row C, seat 14, because it was that ticket that had brought her here. And that night, someone else was changed, and that's how it happened. And I think that's a great story about how we're all connected, about how just the littlest things can be brought to life and completely flower in people. And we don't even know it sometimes. And much like with my own boy, who I was just like, go read a comic, because I love comics. He's got several. He picked one up and he discovered something that he loved, and he decided to create his own artwork with it. And it's that community that has been established, not only through that represented in the story, but that we hope to do here, somehow be that seed for somebody else in the community. And now we've got a few kids here. How about we go downstairs and we talk about some more stuff about this book.
Peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere you may go. Y'all did it round. Good for you. Our reading this morning is from one of my favorite books. It's called Encountering God, A Spiritual Journey from Bozeman to Benares by the professor Diana Eck, who is a professor of religious studies at Harvard. She wrote this in the mid-1990s. She says, "The private ownership of land has become a sacred principle of American life. The ownership of God takes but a little more audacity than the ownership of nature. Whatever we may think of God, the referent of that word, that symbol, is a mystery. God is finally beyond our grasp. God is not ours, even with the grace of God's revealing. There are, however, Christians and people of other faiths who seem to have no trouble with speaking with God's ultimacy with one breath and staking out a private territory of God's ultimacy with, and staking out private territory of God's activity with the next. But what if we presuppose that God's activity and grace abound? What if we presuppose, as Hindus do, that the names and forms of one God are many, limited only by our human capacity to recognize them? What might we learn then of the one we call God, who cannot be owned as we wish to own land and property? The moment we humans grasp God with jealousy and possessiveness, we lose hold of God. One might add that the religious point here is quite the opposite of God's jealousy, of which we hear so much in the Old Testament. It is God's infinite capacity to love, and the problem is human jealousy. All of us, in almost every religious tradition, live our lives with a theology of sorts, whether we think about God as father or mother, lover or hero, tyrant or thousand-armed protector. Even if we think more abstractly of the ground of being, or of depth, dimension, or ultimate concern, or as theologian Paul Tillich would put it, or think of God as absent, meaningless, or foolish ideas, and an outworn name, we still have a theology, in the sense that we made some ultimate evaluative decisions about the meaning of the term God for ourselves. Even those who are uncomfortable with the term God, who quarrel with God, or who reject God, have an idea and an image of God. Our concept of God is not simply given. We learn it, for better or for worse. We develop the operative concept of God, with which we live, inheriting God, as it were, from our historical religious traditions as it is taught to us. Learning something of God from our families and teachers, from personal friends and public figures, we develop an impression of what this word God means. Perhaps it becomes more than a concept, and we experience God for ourselves. But even within a single religious tradition such as Christianity, where the image of God is seen in Christ, people live lives of vastly different concepts of God. Some live with an angry and vengeful God over their shoulder. Some live with gods of forgiveness. Some live with a revolutionary God, others with a God who is a pillar of the status quo. We need to acknowledge our responsibility for the image of God that we are content to believe in or not. So ends our reading. At this time, we take an opportunity to commit ourselves to our community. As we live out our values in the world, we ask all who join with us today to align our financial commitments with our values and with the sharing of the plate this month. We ask you to please be generous as you are able to. And while the offering is being taken, we invite you to come forward and light a candle for all joys, concerns, and sorrows written in your heart. Please come. The offering will now be taken. We are grateful for all of the generosity here, now, and always. Let us become aware of the energy that brings us together in our shared joys and sorrows and milestones. As we move into a time of quiet, may we each open our minds and hearts to a place of calm and allow the coming of love and healing to fill us. There were no joys, concerns, or milestones shared in our book today.
There would have been one if I may.
Ah,
Brian,
okay.
for my niece's mother, nephew's mother, struggling with liberation. And was last I heard, 19.
Our prayers for healing for her and support for her family. Reverend Lynn Cox offers us this to reflect on. Spirit of life, who draws us together in a web of holy relationships, may your presence known with us and in us and among us remind us that we are not alone in history. Ignite us with the courage of the living tradition. Remind us that we are not alone in entering the future. Anchor us with patience and perseverance. Remind us that we are not alone in our times of grief and pain. Comfort us with your Spirit manifest in human hands and voices. Remind us that we are not alone in joy and wonder. Inspire us to honor and extend the beauty we find in this world, divine music of the universe. Let our hearts beat in diverse and harmonious rhythms, cooperating with an everlasting dance of love. May we move with the rhythms of peace. May we move with the rhythms of compassion. May we move with the rhythms of justice. Source of stars and planets and water and land, open our hearts to all of our neighbors. Open our souls to a renewal of faith. Open our hands to join together in the work ahead. So be it. Blessed be. Amen. Let us take a moment now in silence to reflect on these words and those things in our hearts. So be it. Please join us now in our hymn of meditation, number 18, What Wondrous Love, and rise as you're willing and able in body or spirit. Wondrous love is this, oh my soul, oh my soul. What wondrous love is this, oh my soul. What wondrous love is this that brings my heart to bliss and takes away the pain Thank you. Please be seated. Well, Happy New Year. I know it feels like we're getting late enough now we shouldn't say that, but I haven't seen you. So I hope you had a joyous and happy New Year. Sorry we didn't do Christmas Eve this year, but we have one in the can for next year. In the 3,000-year-old Hindu scripture, the Rig Veda, it is written, "Truth is one. The wise call it by many names." This is a challenge to our Western culturally ingrained monotheism, which underlies many of the assumptions in our lives, such as one God, one saved people, one truth, one normality. Yet, even within the traditions of monotheism, there are multiple ways to understand God as parent, lover, spirit, creator, redeemer, son, warrior, destroyer, shepherd, etc., etc., etc. As many words as we may throw at our understanding of God, we must recognize the inherent limitations of words themselves. Words and language are symbols. As such, they are human creations, and therefore they are, by their very nature, finite. Because words and humans are particular and finite, they cannot express or encompass the totality of existence, the holy, whether it is finite or infinite. Therefore, any human claims to have complete understanding of the holy or to know the whole mind of God are impossible and are a mistake. Any human experiences or claims about the holy, goddess God, are only partial and finite. This leads us then to the issue of idolatry. Oh, goody. Contrary to the popular notion and a lot of old movies, the idea that it takes a stone statue to commit idolatry, any claim to know the whole mind of God or reality of God is an act of idolatry. Idolatry occurs when we confuse the non-ultimate with the ultimate, the part for the whole. When we confuse human language and symbols about the holy with the holy itself. The old saying is, the map is not the terrain, and the finger pointing to the moon is not the same as the moon itself. Therefore, any attempt to make absolute claims about God or the holy is an act of idolatry. This has some interesting implications. Think about the response you might get the next time someone is trying to impress you with the inerrancy of some religious scripture, and you lay this little bit of logic on them. Very frankly, any kind of scriptural literalism is an act of idolatry, period. Harvard theologian Diana X. writes, "We must not claim that God, as we know God, exhausts the reality of God. To do so and to claim ultimacy for human symbols and language is truly idolatry. God always transcends what we humans can apprehend or understand. No tradition can claim the holy or the truth, capital T, as its private property. As Gandhi put it so succinctly, revelation is the exclusive property of no tradition or tribe." Now, as to the larger issue of truth, there is a recurring nightmare that many of us who wear corrective lenses occasionally live through. We're not able to find our glasses because we need our glasses to see where we left our glasses. Right? Been there. In the movies, this is often complicated by the person blindly casting about and then stepping on their glasses. I feel that often this is a good metaphor for our lives and the search for reliable truths, especially truths about the nature of the holy and our relationships with and within it. When we are unfocused and confused, a constant state for many of us, we might not know or recognize the truth we are looking for, even if it's right in front of us. We need ways to identify and test what we lay our hands on. In the marketplace of ideas and information we can use the opinions of others as guides, but in the end, we have a responsibility to go out and test it for ourselves. Fortunately, as Unitarian Universalists, we know there are many windows open to the sky of the eternal. Our religious community is one place where we can share in journeys together. together. One of the regular confusions about, and even within Unitarian Universalism, is that we are somehow just a bunch of socially progressive moral relativists, or that there are no constants in what and why we hold the faith we do. And in typically infuriating liberal religious style, the answer is probably, well, yes and no. When we make an effort to say what we believe and why, the formulations we approach begin to look in many ways like what we have now as our principles and purposes, or as in some of the new things coming out, what they call Article 2, which will be coming forward in a few months. We use the principles and purposes as a touchstone for most of our articulation about ourselves theologically and morally. It's been sort of the principal construct for the last 37, 38 years. Let me take this opportunity to share, especially with any newcomers here or online, that this is not a creed, at least not intentionally, and not in the traditional sense. This is a democratically arrived at covenant between the member congregations of our association, studied and debated and passed in the mid-1980s. And we are currently going through a similar process right now and will for the next several years. It is not set in stone, as witnessed by changes that had been made previously and by the current process of reviewing and completely revising all of that. Our covenant's authority comes from all of us as members of UU congregations. This is a statement of beliefs commonly held among us. This is not a litmus test for participation in this or any UU society, but it is a good fit indicator. And those people who have significant difficulty with large portions of this document will probably be uncomfortable as UUs. We do not believe in nothing, and no matter how inclusive we try to be, not everyone will find salvation they seek here. One of the things I tell people is we don't claim to have all of the truth, but we're pretty sure nobody else does either. So it's a statement of humility. The reason human beings want answers given to us is that it is easier if we are given the answers, right? And hence we do not have to spend as much time and energy, and we can focus on application and practice. The difference for us as Unitarian Universalists is that the process of finding and determining what is true is the application, and it is a religious and even spiritual practice for us. As the legendary defense attorney Clarence Darrow said, "The pursuit of truth shall set you free, even if you never catch up with it." The content of truth and understanding is not separate from the ways we pursue, discover, and determine them. Let me say this again. The content of truth and understanding is not separate from the ways we pursue, discover, and determine them. Now, I could spend copious amounts of time telling the history of how we came up with the following sources of truth and understanding, and you know I could, but I'll cut to the chase and outline what I understand is the three basic ways of knowing and the sources of truth. Let me be very clear when I say truth, I'm speaking about it with a small lowercase t. It may be more accurate to speak of many truths we can know than truth, capital T, with a definite article. We do not believe we have or can have all of the truths or truth, but we are pretty certain no one else does. And we also know that there is no truth constantly being revealed, that there is truth, new truth, constantly being revealed and made available to us. And therefore, religious and otherwise, it is not sealed or consigned to a particular time and place. These in turn mean that we all have a role to play and need to share in order to have a better or fuller understanding of what is true. A fundamental understanding of what we are doing as religious liberals was articulated well by Unitarian suffragette Susan B. Anthony. In speaking with her Quaker friend Lucretia Mott, she offered that we seek truth for authority, not authority for truth. Now think about that when you think about conservative pushes for attachment to authority and using that as a way of deciding what is true or not true. For liberals, and I'm not talking about political liberals, I'm talking about theological and philosophical liberals, we find authority in truth, not finding truth in authority. So anytime someone defers to authority as a source of truth, a little alarm should go off. Okay? And we even catch ourselves doing that, right? For example, I am not quoting Susan B. Anthony because her saying somehow gives me more or less credibility, but because she said it well and concisely. In a world where we rely on experts for just about everything, it is important to remember that it is not who is saying the thing, but what they say and how they got there. I find it an important personal practice to be self-aware of our human tendencies to cite authority for truth, or to disregard something because of who may have said it. That's another thing to keep in mind. Now, given all of this, there are three basic sources of truth that are virtually universal in use by humans in determining truth, particularly religious truths. There are a number of different ways of articulating these, but the simplest is that they are tradition, reason, and experience. Tradition, reason, and experience. And it is the ways we define these and in which they interact with them that is different for us as Unitarian Universalists. In most religious traditions, tradition itself, or that which is inherited understanding of things, usually is the lens through which critical reason or thought or an experience or intuition are viewed and interpreted. Tradition trumps the other two in a kind of hierarchy or ladder of truth. As Unitarian Universalists, tradition has a slightly different definition and relationship to reason and experience. For us, tradition includes not only those things from our institutional and theological past, but includes all of the inherited knowledge and wisdom of humanity. Now, we have to be careful about things like appropriation when we do this, but we can learn wisdom without appropriating things. All of the inherited knowledge and wisdom of humanity is what we consider to be a part of the accepted tradition. This has some important implications for us in our day-to-day conversations with other folks. How many of you, in being asked about your religion, have been asked if you were Unitarian Universalist and used the Bible? Well, when asked that question, I used to waffle and try to give highly refined answers because it caused my own eyes to glaze over from disinterest. And what I say now, though, is that the question, do we use the Bible or believe in the Bible, is yes. Because we do use the Bible as part of our inherited wisdom tradition. We just may not use it the same way they do. However, we also use the Quran, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, the Buddhist Sutras, and the Tao Te Ching, as well as the collected works of Shakespeare, the Humanist Manifestos, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the lyrics of rock musician Tom Waits. The last one I often get a really cockeyed look at from some folks because I explained that I think Tom Waits raises some very important theological reflection questions. He says, there is no devil, it's just God when he drinks. I think there's some interesting things for some of us who come from families with issues that's worth reflecting on. So there are many possible sources of truth about the holy. So if someone asks us, do we use the Bible? We say, yes, and other texts as well. Next for us, critical thought and reason are exactly that, with some of the nuances and varieties from the scientific method to logic and debate, and it strives to present the empirical, that which can be observed and verified in an objective way. In fact, intuition and experience, in contrast, intuition and experience are subjective and usually highly personal and individual in nature. They are the things we claim to know directly but can only convey to others indirectly: poetry, art, symbolic language. As Unitarian Universalists, we understand these three basic sources, tradition, reason, and experience, to be interacting with each other on the same level. That each of this is a lens through which we view the others. So you use each of those as a lens to then look at the other two and a way to compare, contrast, analyze, evaluate. In the same way that various colors or magnifications of lenses bring out the otherwise less obvious detail or other colors or issues, so do these sources highlight in each other what might otherwise not be seen or understood. We discover truth through a three-way conversation or trialogue. Reason informs tradition, which informs experience, and back and forth and around we go. It is a constantly ongoing process of conversation in which we approach each other with the very least, an initial openness that the other might have something to contribute to our understanding and perhaps even change what we know to be true. It's an unrelenting openness to other possibilities of what the other might teach us and add to our understanding of the truths that are knowable by us. Now, I feel that this openness is our strength as Unitarian Universalists, as religious liberals, but it can be a weakness if we let it deteriorate into an assumption that we as UUs can believe whatever we want. How many of you ever heard that in our congregations? We can believe whatever we want. It is not true. Okay? It's not. The problem is, then we often get seen as people whose brains are so open, they'll fall out. Discover the truth of our lives here and now takes deliberate and intentional acts of attention and practice. In the end, discerning truth is a spiritual discipline. Education and discussion are religious disciplines for us, just as action in the world to create change and to know others are also spiritual disciplines. As journalist Roger Rosenblatt writes, if one asks, then, where the larger truth is to be sought, the answer is where it has always been, in history, poetry, art, nature, education, conversation, in the tunnels of one's own mind. So how do we know what is true? Through engaging, not just accepting, the inherited traditions of humanity, through our direct experiences, and through use of critical thought. For certain, this way of knowing often takes longer and is usually messier and perhaps less certain in the short run. But it has the advantage of steering us in the paths of wisdom and compassion in the long run. It can better help us and the world to be whom and what we can be together as the beloved community. In a world increasing in its complexity and multiplicity, rigid, singly focused ways of understanding life, the holy, the ultimate goddess God, become more brittle. It is ever increasingly necessary to be able to see the reflection of the spirit of life in the eyes different from our own, to be open to understanding of the underlying significance of everything different from our own. The interconnected web of all existence is woven of many different strands. As Unitarian Universalists, we should not and cannot abandon God language to those who would just as soon abuse us with it. We need to acknowledge our own responsibility for the image of God that we are content to believe in or not. As Unitarian Universalists, we are already diverse, but we need to use the various languages we have to share together the profoundness of our lives and find new ways for us to experience each other as part of the holy breathing of the world. In turn, we can offer our lives to the world as examples of more open, loving, and caring ways of being in the manyness and oneness that embraces us all. So be it. I invite you now to join us in our closing hymn, number 345 in the hymnal, "With joy we claim the growing light, and rise as you're willing and able in body or spirit." joy reclaim the growing light, advancing from and widening view, the larger freedom, clearer sight, which from the old unfold the new. With wider view come loftier goal, with all the light more good to see, with freedom truer, self-control, with knowledge deep, reverence be. Let us extinguish our chalice. In unison, let us say, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Within each of our hearts there is a most glorious light. Go forth and let its spark help you understand what troubles both you and others. Go forth and let its light of reason be a guide in your decisions. Go forth and bring its rays of hope to those in need of help in both body and spirit, that they may find healing. Go forth and fan the flames of passion to help heal our world. Go forth and spread the warm glow of love, pushing back the darkness of the world. Go forth and share our glorious light in this world. May the Eternal bless you and protect you. May the Eternal smile upon you and favor you. May the Eternal befriend you and prosper you and all people always. Amen, and blessed be. Thank you. Please be seated.
So much love to know.
Try the veal. Try the veal.